All right, all. So just like with Adobe Photoshop, where we decided that we might want to make our own documents as opposed to opening up existing documents, there's going to be times you want to set up your own document in a program like Adobe Illustrator. So what I'm going to do is to set up a new document in Illustrator, you're going to go to File and then New or Command or Control N. And we have all of these options, despite the fact that this part here is the majority, we actually don't really need that part. Instead, we're going to use this part here. All right. This is where you can put a name. If you don't give it a name, it gives your, default document some sort of very generic name like Untitled One. I'm going to give it something just a smidge better if I can find my Where is my... Oh, there it is. I'm going to give it a slightly better name, like my document, my awesome document. Next, we are setting up dimensions. A lot of times, traditionally, people used Illustrator to make graphics that were meant to be printed. So typically, the width is usually, measured in physical measurements like inches or feet or yards or metric. That being said, in this class, everything that we do is going to be digital because at the end of the day, we are making videos, and videos only are displayed on either televisions or, computer screens, that kind of thing. So we're not printing anything, so we really don't need to measure it in a physical finite measurement system like inches or, feet. So I'm going to set this to pixels. Remember, this is how we measure things in Photoshop. And I'm going to set it to like, I don't know, 500 pixels by 500 pixels. Okay. We're going to not worry about artboards for now. Bleed, we're not going to worry about. Bleed is specifically a print thing. And since we're not printing, I'm not going to really go over that. If you want to learn more about that, the, digital 12A or digital 4A class is a class that I would strongly recommend. Background is what color you'd like the background to be, like white or transparent or black. White is fine. Under advanced options, the two major methods or two major elements here are color space and raster effects. So you might remember we talked about the concept of color spaces if we went in depth with it if you did Photoshop. If you did Photopea, we kind of talked about it briefly. But the idea of a color space is the amount of colors that can exist in the document. Okay. You might want to view the one from January 26th. This is where I kind of go over it more in depthly with my slides. So the idea here is when you make a document, there's a range of colors that you can have. Okay. And how we produce colors is called the color space or the color mode. Okay. The two major color modes that you're going to come across in design typically are the RGB color space or color mode and the CMYK color space or color mode. Okay. RGB stands for red, green, and blue, or in other words, red, green, and blue light. So RGB is how digital devices produce color, like a computer or a cell phone or a TV screen. So in other words, inside of your TV, there are red, green, and blue diodes, or diodes producing, I should say, red, green, and blue light, and those mix together to form all of the other colors. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. These are the four colors of a printer. Okay. So if you were to make a graphic in, say, Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator and you wanted to print it, the CMYK method using cyan ink, magenta ink, yellow ink, and black ink is how Kinko's would, or any printer for that matter, no matter how basic or complex it is, those are the four inks that would be used to mix together. So at the end of the day, One is a spectrum or a list of colors produced by light, and one is a spectrum produced by ink. That's what, ink is from, a printer. Okay. In this course, we are not printing. We are only displaying things on screen, which is the RGB spectrum. I would recommend you use the RGB spectrum because it is a bigger or a wider spectrum than the CMYK method. Okay. What this means is you can produce more colors with light or on a computer screen than you can with a printer. Okay. So, I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's really no reason to not use RGB as long as you're not printing. So let's keep it at RGB so we can maintain or have available all of the, have the large spectrum of colors that we want. All right, next is something called raster effects. So raster effects, you might notice it says PPI, PPI or pixels per inch, sometimes referred to as dots per inch or DPI or dots per inch, is how many pixels there are per physical inch. But Mr. Hurwitz, I thought you told me vectors don't have pixels, and that's true, they don't. However, there are some situations where if you apply an effect in Illustrator, it would convert that vector graphic into a raster graphic. If that were to happen, what they are asking is how many pixels do you want there to be when it converts it from a vector to a raster? Okay. There is high resolution or 300 pixels per inch, medium resolution or 150 pixels per inch, and screen or about 72 pixels per inch. In this case, I would say as long as you're not printing, which is not what we're doing in this course, it's a better to keep it as screen or a lower resolution. 72 is enough for basic, showing, displaying on a computer screen, which is all that we're planning on doing because we're working with video. If you made it a higher resolution, the problem with this is that it would be a physically bigger file size, and that's not always really what you want unless you're going to get something out of it, but we're not really printing, so, All right, so I'm going to hit create, and then, there's my document. All right, so you can, I gave you guys kind of an example here where it's like, you can try to produce file with the following effects. Let's say you already have a document and you want to make changes to it. So here, this is exercise 4. What I'm going to do is if I wanted to switch the color space, I could go to File, Document Color Mode. So right now it's being set to CMYK. I want to take advantage of the full range of colors, so I'm going to set that to RGB. You can tell the color spectrum by checking it here. You can also see it on the tab here. If you want to edit the size of a document that's already been created, edit the size of an artboard, what I'm going to do is go under File, Document Setup, and then what I'm going to do is go under where it says Edit Artboards. If you highlight the artboard, you see I'm getting the little blue kind of checker, or not checker, dash line around it. What I can now do is if I were to resize this document, I am making the artboard bigger or smaller. To get out of this, you can hit Escape. Another way to do all of this is inside of Adobe Illustrator, there's a panel called Properties. Properties is this panel that updates depending on what you're currently working with. It's contextual. So if I were to click on the artboard itself, there's an option here you might see that says Edit Artboards. And if I click on that, this is another way to enter Edit Artboard mode, and I could resize this. Not only could I do this by hand, if you wanted to be more precise, I could go up here under Transform where it says W and H. W and H is short for width and height, and those are the dimensions of that particular artboard that I have currently highlighted. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I think it says here in the instructions to make it 6 by 6. So I'm going to make it 6 inches by 6 inches. Okay. While you're in edit mode, if you want, you could highlight and just like physically move the artboard. To get out of this, once again, I could hit escape, or you might notice in the properties panel at the very top right, it says exit. Exit would also exit your mode there. One thing you can do in Illustrator, is you can actually technically have multiple artboards. So once again, I'm going to hit Edit Artboards to go into Artboard mode. And if I were to click and drag into this blank area, what I'm doing is making an additional artboard. Okay, so this is Artboard 1, Artboard 3, Artboard 4. To select between the different artboards, you can click on it and you can see that it will highlight that artboard and allow you to make changes to it. Why would you want to have multiple artboards? Well, let's just say for the sake of argument, I was building a graphic in Adobe Illustrator that was meant to be like a logo of a company. Chances are that logo is going to go on multiple things. For instance, that logo could go on a t-shirt. It could also go on a business card. It could go on some letterhead, this, that, or the other. So rather than having multiple individual Adobe Illustrator files, you could put all of the documents or the artboards into one file here. This kind of lets you view them all at once if you want to. Then later on, if you want to print or export from it, simply highlight the artboard you want to work with, go to File and Print, and you can see that you can actually choose which artboard you want to work with. So if I were to go here, I'm going to choose which artboard. I would export just artboard 1, or I could just export artboard 4, so on and so on. If you don't want to have an artboard, let's say you have multiple artboards and you really just want to have one, you can highlight the artboard and hit the delete or enter key, and you can see that that removes it. Once again, to get out of this, hit escape or hit the exit button at the top right-hand corner of the properties panel. Okay. All right, when we were in a raster editing program like Photopea, I'm gonna open up an image in Photopea, if you don't mind. If you remember, programs like Photoshop and Photopea, we have pixels, right? And if we wanted to select and move part of an image, we had to tell the application which part of which part of the photo we wanted to move. So we had various tools. So for instance, this is Photopea, and it's like, okay, I could use maybe the lasso tool here, and I'm just gonna copy this, and I could move. So that lasso tool basically highlighted or selected a group of pixels here, and that allowed me to move it. Okay. The same would work if I was in Photoshop or pretty much any raster editing program like GIMP or Clip Studio Pro or anything along those lines. Um, a vector program, it's actually a lot easier to select. So essentially what you need to do is, okay, I have a vector shape here, I have a vector shape here. What you want to do is just make sure that you have the selection arrow. I call it the black arrow sometimes. It's usually the very top tool. And if you click on a vector, you highlight it or you select it. Then you can literally move it wherever you want to. Okay. So literally, if you click on a vector and move it, you should be able to select and move it because vectors, unlike, say, pixels in a raster editing program, are usually independent of each other. Each path, regardless of whatever shape it is, like a circle, square, or whatever, is usually defaultly independent of one another. Okay. You might have remembered when we were in programs like Photoshop or Photopea that if we wanted to scale something, we would highlight part of that image or highlight that layer and then go to something like free transform. This would allow you to move and to scale or rotate, I should say. Okay. In Illustrator, we can, if you were to take your selection tool and highlight a vector, you'll notice it actually automatically gives you the free transform, and I could scale vertically, I could scale horizontally. If you want to maintain aspect ratio, the way you would do this is by holding down Shift while moving the ones in the top corner. If you want to rotate a vector, simply highlight it. Once again, you should defaultly get a bounding box. And if you put your cursor just a little bit beyond the edges here, you can see that I am now able to rotate. If you want to rotate in increments of 45 degrees, hold down the Shift key as such. If I were to rotate this, you'll notice that I can rotate it, 180 degrees or all the way around. But what I'm actually trying to do is flip it. You may remember where in Photoshop, it's like I could flip a image so that the left becomes right and the right becomes left. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. There's a couple ways you could do this. I could take, while using the free transform, I could take the left and move it to the right side as such. Another way to do this is going under Object, Arrange, or sorry, Transform, Reflect, and that would flip it. You could flip it either horizontal or vertical. Another way to do some of these things that I've been doing is to actually, if you want to be more precise about this, is to use the Properties panel. If I click on this, you can see the width and height. Right now it's being measured in inches. I can measure it in pixels too if I set the document in pixels. I can do that by going under Document Setup. Let's set the units to pixels. And right now my image is about my image is about 142 pixels by about 149, give or take. Let's say I want it to be exactly 200 by 200. I could type that number in there and you could say enlarge it. Here, let's say I wanted to rotate this. This is the degree symbol, like in math. Right now it's set to 315. If I set that to 0, that's its default. If I want to rotate it 90 degrees, there you go. If I wanted to rotate this exactly 300 and, I don't know, 33 degrees, boom, there you go. Okay. And if you want to flip a graphic over, you can see here how this has a built-in flip horizontal and flip vertical. I can flip the graphic horizontally or vertically. All right, so I want you guys to try that out. Try making your own documents. That was exercise 3, and editing documents. That was 4. Also try to select and free transform or resize, scale, rotate a vector shape. Okay.